Should we get going?
Yeah, let's start.
Okay. Hello, everybody. We're here to talk about building healthy multilingual relationships. Very fitting for DrupalCon Global. And we're going to talk more specifically about how to correctly nest entities. Hi.
Hola.
I'm the artist formerly known as the CEO of Hook 42. My name is Amy Hannaford, and
I'm not an artist, but I'm Christian Lopez, and I work for Lingotech in the Drupal 8 and Drupal 9 integration development.
And I just want to take a moment to say thanks for all the fish. Hook 42 closed up operations in March. And I want to say thank you to the Drupal community and its evolving initiatives to support the more inclusive web. And thank you to both Hook 42 and Lingotech for 8 years of multilingual collaboration. So we've been close together for a long time. A little bit about this session. First of all, the slides will be a little bit text heavy. That's on purpose, so everyone can read the session after and use it for reference. There is a bit.ly link that is in the chat, and we can surface that link again a little bit later. So this session is primarily focused on Drupal 8+. So we can't cover everything because multilingual nesting is complex. Nesting entities is complex. We're going to focus on the most common entities, specifically content entities, and we'll cover configurations and their expected outcomes. But just know every site is different, but they all use similar configuration patterns. So the configuration patterns that we cover today can be applied to your site. But why are we really here? That's because we have clients, internal or external, that are like, yeah, we want a new site, or the site looks great. Hey, let's add multilingual support to it. And you're like, yeah, let's do that. We can do that. But Drupal is a very powerful platform. So it's feature rich. It's extensible, it's scalable, it's flexible, it has multilingual support, and they just asked us for making a multilingual website. But there are a lot of moving parts to make a functional multilingual website. And a lot of times with multilingual sites, there's a disconnect of expectations versus reality. And what we want to do in all of the projects is to prevent unhappiness with defining clear expectations and provide a predictable and functional website. And a lot of times when expectations aren't met, people aren't happy because the spending increases. There's an increase, that time to market is slower. The site may be hard to use. It may not function correctly, and it might have a lot of development overhead. There's a lot of different reasons why your customer can get, and your team can get a little bit frustrated. But with reality, using Drupal as a platform, since it has, with great flexibility comes complexity. There are so many permutations. There's a lot of different ways to approach site building, content strategy, the different content editing interfaces available. The display and theme layer is very extensible. The content publication activities and personal customization is got a lot of moving parts, and always the best practices are evolving as the technology evolves. But in all cases, when you add multilingual support, it exponentially increases your test cases and complexity for your site. And once again, when there is great power, there is great responsibility. Spoken by Winston Churchill and Uncle Ben Parker from Spider-Man. When we get started, we need to understand a little bit about multilingual content and site strategy.
So one thing that we need to know and we need to identify as soon as possible is if we are doing translation versus localization. So for those new in the subject, translation is the process of translating words from one language to another. So it's just saying the same message in the appropriate sounds for that language. But localization also involves the context. It's adapting a document or an application or a website to meet not only the language, but also the cultural and other requirements of that market, of that locale. So for example, this is some signs. I think the first one is from Brazil. So the stop sign, which we all know, they actually translate the word to Portuguese. It says pare. Localization, even if there are no words, is that I know that there are wild animals in the road. I need to be cautious while driving, but the wild animals in a given area can actually change. So I live in Spain, and these are 3 different signs that we can have in Spain. It wouldn't make any sense to see a wild penguin on a traffic sign. So in this case, we are adapting to the fauna of the area where these traffic signs are found.
Once your team has a firm understanding of translation and localization, can further define the content business rules. And you need to use a realistic language-first approach throughout discovery. And you want to cover key topics. First of all, what resources are available to the project? How much money, how much time for the upfront work and the ongoing support? What people are needed on the project? You have to understand your markets. That's including the language spoken, the locales served, and the translation expectations around each market. You have to really deeply dive into the purpose of your site. What does it do? What type of content does it have? Does it have products? What use cases does your content use? What frequency is your content updated? Then you get into the fun design and UI of the site, covering all locales. Then you have to discuss a lot about content creation, including content editing tools and workflows. And also, there's more, but this is a key topic, storage, how to store within Drupal per field your content needs. So there's a lot going on. This sounds like a standard full website discovery activity. You just have to have another layer of a language-first approach. And so we're going to cover some key questions to start some conversations. First of all, about your expected display. Is the whole page structure the same across languages? Does any region of the page's structure change per locale? And does the page structure change drastically across locales? For example, does your Japanese site need to have a much different layout than your EMEA sites? Does any part of the content need to change per locale? And often, page content is about 90% the same as the source language throughout the locales. It's that 10% of the page that has locale-specific content that is overlooked in discovery activities. Because a lot of times, folks will say, hey, we just need to translate. We just need to translate. Of course, it's going to be the same across the board. And then those content marketers in each one of the market regions and locales will say, hey, I need to say some different words. I need to localize my content. I can't just translate the activity. You have to discuss your content creation and editing tools. The key questions is who updates content and who translates it? What control does that editor have? Is it just copy, or do they have layout? What responsibilities do the translators have? Do they have a combination of roles? And also, what is required for content and translation approval? How and when does the content change per locale? And what's interesting, this is why this called out, many folks will come into a project and they will have an expectation of what layout approach that they would like to use within Drupal before they hear the requirements of the site and the requirements of the content editing tools. And that is something that it's natural. People have a set of tools that they're used to, but I want to call that out is keep an open mind when understanding the requirements and choosing the Drupal layout approach. Also, you have to deep dive on the content storage and field planning. So as you look through the content, you want to ask questions for each field of any of your content entities. Does the field content stay the same for each language? Does the field content value stay the same? But do they need to be displayed in a translation language? And we'll get into an example later about that. Does the field content contain non-translated or language-specific information? And how will the field content be displayed? There's no answers here. These are questions that you need to bring up to hear the requirements around your design and UX before you choose your multilingual nesting strategies. There is a way to overcome some challenges in discovery. That would be education and full team involvement. So just as we define translation and localization, do that within your project. Define the life cycle of every type of content, including its translation states across your site. Have some education and teach people about multilingual basics, and that could be changed by role. And define expected content differences across locales. Sometimes press releases are the same across every locale, but then the landing pages are much different. So surface those types of samples. You want to define the content types, workflows, and translation needs around each one. And please always define media content needs very early and document everything. Document everyone? Yeah, you could write everybody down too. Because if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail, especially in the sites that have a lot of complex component-based layouts and multilingual. So we're going to cover some multilingual and nesting fundamentals.
So before you go on, we have already a question, and I think we can actually answer that because it's related. So Robert asked if we initially set up the content to translate, which is actually localized content, how can we break apart the entity to be different? So so this is what we are somehow covering here, is that we really need to plan this in advance. Of course, there are solutions if you want to change your mind afterwards. So I think we can go into the details afterwards, but I would say that it depends on the fields that you really need to change if you are using localize, and sometimes changing the settings of your fields means that you may need a migration. So we can discuss the details later if you want, but
we'll have some examples that touch on this. Yeah. So that's good. Okay, go ahead, Christian.
So the expectations is that Drupal 8 was built with language in mind from the start. So there's quite a better support than Drupal 7 for that. Content entities are language aware. You can define fallback rules for one language to go to another. The entity APIs have multilingual support out of the box. And modules can build on that system, taking that into account. So we will expect that everything works. And we are great, but sometimes reality is not that good. So there's a language detection that you need to configure. You can define the language fallbacks. Then you have your custom displays and your custom theme layer, which may need to have this into account, consider multilingual into account. Then you can have multiple extensions from Contrib that most of the times they work with multilingual. Like the situation improved a lot since Drupal 7 times, but still you can have these issues with Contrib, with custom modules, or while editing via content editing interfaces. And things are actually constantly evolving. The code and the Contrib modules are evolving. The best practices also are evolving. So you really need to revisit everything. You need to plan carefully, but you also need to revisit from time to time if you want to change something.
Yeah, and there are a lot of content entities that exist. These are just some of the most commonly talked about ones. And there's some basics about this, and a lot of what we're going to talk about is common sense. But as we go through even the most complex multilingual sites, every time we look through debugging and auditing, we come back to these basics. So hold on tight to these basics. Content entities can be translated or not translated. They can have language display fallback rules. So if a translation does not exist, what is displayed? Content entities have fields that can be translated if desired. And note, a content entity must be configured for translation if any of the fields within the content entity need to be translated. There are field-level multilingual configurations. Once again, each field can be configured for translation only if the content bundle is configured for translation. And we'll cover paragraphs later, because I know a lot of people are like, what is that other thing with paragraphs? And a field can be one of two types. It can contain content, or it points to another content entity using an entity relationship, or even a concrete revision using entity reference revisions. So it can hold the content or it can point somewhere else for it. That's it. And when a field is translated, the field's value can change across all locales. And when we say locale, it's all of the different language locale combinations for a specific content entity. If a field is not translated, the value stays the same across locales. This is for all of the fields. So hold on to this concept and we'll carry this forward through the session. So simply, the translated content of a text field, if the source is green, the translation to Spanish is verde. And I can't pronounce Spanish very well. I probably might say it like French. The expected behavior is the content for Spanish will be a translation of the English source. A translation of Spanish must exist to display in Spanish. And if no Spanish translation exists, the content is displayed using language fallback rules. So it could be the source language and that type of thing. So a non-translated entity reference. So if the source value has references to entity 1 and entity 2, the parent entity's Spanish value is still entity 1 or entity 2. It makes sense. I did not want to change the values of my entity reference. The content for Spanish will be a translation of the English source. So it's the same meaning, it's just in a different language. The parent entity will display Spanish versions of entity 1 and entity 2. The content for Spanish must exist in Spanish to actually display in Spanish. So many times there's missing translations. Configurations could be right, but there's just missing translations. But if no Spanish translation exists, the language fallback rules of the referenced entity applies. Not the top level entity that has the entity reference field. It is the referenced entity. And then there is the translated entity reference. So the source language has a reference entity 1, entity 2. In real life, it might sound like a product variant 1 and 2. The translation or localization, actually, in Spanish, may contain entity 3 and 4, which is product variant 3 and 4, you can see that the locale is different than the English source. But the content for Spanish must also exist in Spanish to display in Spanish, and the fallbacks rules will apply. Do you see there's like we're seeing a pattern here, and we're going to help make sure that we reference this pattern over and over. But the nesting itself is to include one or more content entities within another content entity, either by an entity reference field or extended entity manager. And I'm calling that's roughly something similar to Layout Builder. All multilingual content bundle and field level configuration expectations that we just talked about apply for each nested entity bundle the same way, right? So it'll be interesting, but as you nest, you need to make sure that the expected content you see, if you need to translate anything underneath it, will assume the language you want it to have. But the first rule of entity nesting is don't nest. It's a big ask, isn't it? So avoid nesting in your content strategy as much as possible. Isn't that crazy? You're like, how can I not have that? How can I not use nesting? The second rule of entity nesting is don't use a data model for layout, and that's directly from Chris Vanderwater. I have a reference to one of his recent presentations where he talked about the pros and cons of different entity nesting approaches. The third rule of entity nesting is keep it simple and keep it consistent. Because there are numerous permutations that affect predictable display, use consistent site building patterns and display logic across your theming layer and fallbacks and across your content entities. And has anybody heard of these words, paragraphs, node references, custom content entities, all the things we just talked about? All we do, like I think, oh, paragraphs, node references, and oh my goodness, if I say the word field collections, will we all shudder? Yes, you should shudder, because those were really hard in Drupal 7 to get a really good multilingual expectations out of those. But you know what? People use paragraphs and these nested node references because there wasn't anything else really available for editors to control layouts right at the start in Drupal 8. But the layout management for end users is improving, and it has been improving so quickly over the course of Drupal 8. So lots of movement to consolidate a lot of the different content editing layout approaches into one supercharged set of tools. So I'm excited about that. But you know what? Some sites may still use deep nesting approaches, and so will some developers, because they have some libraries, or they have some templates, they have some structures and tools they already are using. So they're maybe not ready to jump into the newer kind of layout management tools. But a lot of times, oops, are you there? I can't hear anything. Oh, there it is. A lot of times using these nesting approaches, you'll run into some common issues with challenges. Like, why is the wrong language showing? So always go and check if your translations are configured correctly. Then check them again, because the settings must be correct on every nested entity bundle and field that you're using. You want to check for field reuse and misaligned configurations. Often folks will say, oh, cool, I have this paragraph over here. I'm going to use it on my other paragraph or on my other content. And it might have different display expectations and different translation expectations in the newly applied use case. Also, it's like checking to see if the power is on. Do translation exists? Are they published? And are the permissions correct? So super basic things. Once you cover those areas, you can kind of evolve into, did you do something on your theming layer that is interacting with the multilingual configuration? Because a lot of times we've seen like people use content choices plus display logic to drive multilingual display beyond the multilingual language display. And anytime you start extending this with your own customization, it can cause unexpected results and or bugs. So you can use display logic within views. You can have display logic at the theme layer through Twig or preprocessors, custom modules. We've seen people that have a field that has, it says display on, you know, these languages, and there's like a checkbox, and that with the display logic at the theme level caused like visibility. And so with so many of these site building permutations, these edge cases exist. So first check your translations, check to see if you have, check your configurations, check to see if your translations exist, and then get into what have I done a little bit at the theming layer to possibly connect with that. And then there are some bugs, like why is the wrong language showing? A lot of modules and widgets manipulate content during editing and can create unexpected behaviors and or bugs. One of the things happening is the nested entities do not get the correct language passed from parents in a content edit mode. And some of the symptoms are like your nested entity language doesn't match the intended translation language, or they display in the source language of the content entity. They also display in the direct parent language. So if you have two nested layers, it's not the source language. It's not the, well, it might just be in the direct parent language, which might be incorrect. And then also nested entities are created in the default language for that entity. So a lot of those things can happen and have happened. And there's a lot of bug fixes and patches to get around these types of things. So a lot of these symptoms come up around uses of paragraphs or any other nested embedded entities.
Another symptom, sorry.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Another symptom that we forgot to add is like when you actually edit the translation and suddenly the referenced, the nested entities disappear from the parent. This is also a problem we found, and usually it means that the configuration is wrong.
Oh yeah, that's right. We did miss the whoop poof, it's gone moment. Yeah, that's kind of a shock when you're like, hey, where did all my content go? Did I just lose that? And another thing, and once again, see the references at the end of the presentation for more information about the complexities of using like these nested entity approaches on performance and complexity. There's a higher number of loaded entities per rendered pages. There's multiple revisions stored in each edit, which lead to a large DB style. And you have exponentially larger number of revisions in storage, especially when you start multiplying it by the number of supported locales. So if I have 15 locales and many revisions, that's a lot. And then you can say, oh, hey, we have this content and it's changing all the time. So it's like the number of locales and the frequency which is updated is just going to really rack up and increase the amount of revisions you have and impact your site. So some common nesting examples are a single entity reference with a node with a taxonomy term entity reference. So first of all, do you use taxonomy for display rules and CSS styles? Don't translate those terms. Only translate the entity reference if you want the display to change per locale. The expected behavior, the terms passing classes will not be translated and it won't break your display. If you're using taxonomy for content categorization, create the terms and translate them in a separate workflow. use the entity reference field as non-translated. And so that means your term applied to the source language stays the same in all languages, but the translation is displayed. But if you have free-form tagging and user-generated content, well, that depends. It could get really expensive. You can consider not translating the terms, and it requires a richer context-based analysis to find the best configuration for your site. So I see questions, but I'm just gonna, everybody, Christian is gonna poke me when he's ready to ask a question. This is a visualization, and this applies to all of the different type of things we're talking about. If you have a taxonomy term that is not translated, or the entity reference that's not translated, they should stay the same across all of the different translations. You can see that the word small is not translated. That's because I forgot to translate the translation term or the taxonomy term, or maybe it was intended that that's a CSS class or a layout, but I want to choose small. So it stays the same across all languages. When I translate the entity relationship, I expect each one of those locales to have possibly a different value. So you can see everybody has the same value yellow, but then, you know what? English has large and not translated. Spanish has small and not translated. And then also French has large and small. So you can see that this is what your content's going to look like if you translate or not translate your entity relationships. So this pattern applies to everything that we're talking about. I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker, but I'm going to please revisit this deck to read. When you're working with nodes or entities with media references, if the media file asset is the same for all languages, so it's basically a picture without embedded text, like a picture of a butterfly, do not translate the media entity reference field. I should have an asterisk there. But if it doesn't need to change, don't change it. But often you're going to be using a media entity reference field a lot of different places. So also, are the media assets translated? So if the media asset itself is translated in maybe a separate workflow, do not translate the media entity reference field. Expect that you choose one piece of media and the language will change within that media. But this is also assuming that you have a separate translation workflow that takes care of media before it actually, it's there. And are the media assets language or locale specific? And a lot of times we've seen a language specific PDF manuals on sites. So each manual is a single media entity with a specific language. And then that translated, consider translating these media entity reference fields because it allows you to choose a different media entity for each locale. So if I'm on the Spanish site, I can choose the Spanish manual. But the best right way would be to translate the actual file and bind all language manuals together in the same entity. But a lot of times we don't see this happening because people migrate existing media over. They're not sure which media all goes into one bundle. So it's a bit challenged, but that's if you're starting from scratch and you can clean up a nice content, the most correct way would be to translate the file, but bind all of the like content together. But it also depends on your site. Anything else around that, Christian? Like, does that sound pretty close?
No, I think it was right. And actually, I think we need to speed up a bit.
Oh, sorry. And then also, this is the same thing for a custom block. So I'm just going to pop right through. There's a pattern here. And then there's entities inside entities. And Christian, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so it's at the end, it's like we don't care which kind of entity we are embedding. It's always the same patterns. So you need to follow the same configuration patterns when you do this. So you have to think, are my translations going to reference different content, or they are going to reference translations of the same content? Am I going to translate, or am I going to localize? So, and then are these nested entities reused somewhere else or not? Because this also can affect if you want to translate them as part of the hosting entity, or if you want to translate them on their own, if you are using any external services for translation. And a rule for this is actually, can I navigate to that? If I'm embedding a node inside a node, if I can go to the node, the nested node itself in some way, it's visible in the site. Probably I need to translate that on its own. And this also applies to headless sites. Even if you are not displaying your content in Drupal, but you are using Drupal as a backend, maybe in a given page view, you are displaying different content. So do I want to translate that as part of the same document, or are there different entities that I need to care about because they are shown in different places?
Right, and go ahead.
So, for example, another typical use case is the node embedding paragraphs, which is actually entity reference revisions field. So the goal of paragraphs is flexible structure of content. It never was conceived as a layout tool, even if we are sometimes using that because there weren't better solutions when Drupal 8 started. Now probably they are. And this is the very same case. Are different translations going to allow different paragraphs, or I'm only, as it was not a lot already, I'm only translating the content. So that would make you guide you to the decision of if those entity reference revision fields are translatable or not, even if we will see some special characteristics for paragraphs later. An example of this is, for example, for localization. If you have a shop and you have your homepage and you are listing products for different markets, maybe you want to display a different product for each market because it's the most popular product in that market, or maybe because you don't have the regulations to sell all the products in all the markets, or maybe you are adapting to the local market. So this is some stuff that you need to take into account when you are configuring this.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so here we have an example of paragraphs. It's a very easy example. So it's just content that have several paragraphs. So you want the flexibility of defining structured content as a paragraph, but you may want to reference two paragraphs in one given translation, or three in another one.
Oops.
The cat's panic.
I know, sorry, the cat is talking. Yeah, and then here, now we're going to transition. This conversation is transitioning into a complex component-based site building approaches. So, yeah, Christian, do you want to cover this?
So yeah, so what we just show, what we just talked about is what it's called a symmetrical versus asymmetrical translation. So in the symmetrical example is when you actually have like the same content in every translation. The asymmetrical is when you actually want to have translations to actually look different from the source locale, or you have different content, number of references or different references on its translation. So, and this is where the fun starts. For example, in paragraphs, you will find this warning message when you go to the content language translation fields that paragraph fields do not support translation, and it points you to the documentation about that. So a paragraph itself doesn't support to reference different entities on the parent level. So if you have nested entities, nested paragraphs, you can do that in the nested paragraphs, but you cannot do in the first level of the hierarchy. But for that, you have a new country model. It's the paragraph asymmetric translation widget. And this long name, what it means is that actually you can make those paragraphs translatable and reference different content. And even if you still see this warning, the instructions on the module homepage say you need to enable translation for that. So this is something that usually causes this issue we talked about before, that sometimes you are translating, you are editing the target, and suddenly some content disappears from the source, and you think that you are losing your data. Your data is still there. You are just referencing the wrong content for that language. So you need to ensure that you can reference different content for each translation, and for that you need to mark this field as translatable. And answering a question we had in the chat before, I don't remember who it was. Can I change translatability? It depends on the field, but sometimes you may need to actually perform a migration of your content. So it depends on the field type that you are changing. Yeah, and here we have a simple example. I will be quite fast about this. For example, if we had the Drupal association page and we are listing the events by using paragraphs, and we are listing DrupalCon Global and DrupalCon Barcelona, which are global events with a very international audience, but then I want to translate this into Spanish. In the next slide, we will see that with this model, you can actually reference a different paragraphs, or you can actually reference an additional paragraph like this, where I'm also including a local Drupal camp. So you can actually customize for the market you are in.
And if we switch over to Layout Builder, there's so many good sessions about Layout Builder, just see a bunch of those. But to cover the basics, it's provided in core. It provides a user interface for layout configuration. It stores block and layout information directly in the content entity itself, not in another thing like a paragraph. The custom blocks created with the Layout Builder are non-reusable blocks that only exist within the scope of the content entity. When you enable Layout Builder, just at the basic, it allows for default view mode. When you also enable Layout Builder overrides, you can change layout edits per content entity. So for default display structure in multilingual, it's really just used to define the default display structure. So the content entities and translation rules apply everywhere that we just talked about. And if you use the reusable custom blocks, it will follow the basic blocks pattern we talked about. But for entity level overrides in core, it provides layout tools, this content creation interface. And if you are just adding fields from the content entity are used, then the translated language should display okay. But all locales of the entity will have the same layout. But if you start creating custom blocks within Layout Builder, they maintain their source language. So if I created a custom block that said, hi, I'm in English, and I switched to a French or Spanish translation, it would always look like it's in English because it's not carrying over that translated language into its nested entity. So there's some bugs and bug fixes and patches around there to help that. But if you use a reusable block, it will follow the block entity reference pattern. And so if they're translated, the block will show the correct language. So you can see that it gets a bit crazy. And trying to debug this, you can't even see the Layout Builder blocks on the block page. You have to look in the database and look for other things to see, wow, what language is that block really? So, but there are some multilingual extensions from Contrib to help support only when you're using overrides. You can choose asymmetric translations or symmetric translations, but you can only choose one method per whole site, and you should choose mindfully. Right. So for Asymmetric Translations Pro, each locale can support localized content. It's really flexible. Cons, after the first translation from a source language, the content and display are completely decoupled per locale. So that means any updates in English or the source language will not trickle out to the other translations. Symmetric Translations Pros, the source and translated locales are kept in sync. Pro and con, the display is the same across locales. And that's a pro-con because it might be great for what you need, or it might be a limiting factor. And Christian, do you want to talk about some depth level nesting cases?
Yeah, so, well, so as we said before, we had, we didn't have any layout tools and like flexible layout tools in core before. So I've seen Drupal paragraphs to be used for a lot of things, like having different nesting solutions. Like you may have a landing page and then you have a paragraph that somehow the type of the paragraph indicates the layout that you want to use. And this paragraph internally, it actually contains the content itself that you want to have. And then this can reference a different content, which may be a product page. And then this product page has an image, and then you are referencing a media reference there. So this can actually grow up a lot, and you really need to take care that you are you have the right settings for every of these fields that are referencing the deeper levels of the chain.
Yeah, and these are very real site examples. We're not just making this up. We've seen a lot of these in multilingual audits and everything. This is a real deal. And that gets complicated. And a lot of times, I think somebody had asked, hey, does an entity show the right language if the like middle layer entity isn't correct? And the answer is, well, it depends. And it depends where the bug is. If the bug is on the display layer or if the bug is in the data itself. So it's interesting, and that's why if you go back to the basics of configuration and making sure everything is okay, then you can start going through and testing. And we want to talk again that the asymmetrical considerations for both paragraphs and layout builder is if you choose it, you choose it, you do it, and making changes after that is hard. So you have to really test and be planful and mindful about which approach you're going to use very early on in your project. So and also you can switching for layout builder. Sometimes if you switch after content exists, it may lead to content loss or possible content loss. So another set of considerations, we're almost done. Don't just mark every field translatable on your site, please. We've seen this a lot all over the place. It can cause confusion to the content team, and it can create unexpected site bugs during translation. And if you're using a text or select list to define layout, don't translate it, because the class is going to barf if you have German, unless you made the classes in German. Consider other field constraints like character limits, because when you translate something like dog to German, you're going to have a longer character count. You also want to make sure as you use content moderation and locale-specific publication status, those are also tracked in entities and revisions. So that comes into play. So you can see that the complexity of your very standard enterprise-grade Drupal system starts adding layers and layers of where the multilingual challenges can come up. And then also consider timing your source content completion and initial translation, especially when you're using asymmetrical translation models. Like, try to get the source as close to possible to give your translation system and your translation team a nice place to start in all of their translations for that content before it forks off and becomes its own locale kind of being. Also, in the current multilingual tooling efforts, really making sure there's consistent multilingual configuration patterns for each content entity and common use cases. There's a lot of enhanced editor tools and language switchers and workflow management. And hey, let's make sure that we can maybe switch from asymmetrical to symmetrical without a migration. And then also, there's a lot of modules that are out there to use to clean up the bloated revisions in a database. That's not covered here. Watch Chris Vanderwater's presentation. And then really, there's lots of testing. So there's so many multilingual edge cases with Contrib and complexities of your own customizations. You have to test all the permutations and don't just use the Drupal interface. So the takeaways here. Do you want to cover those, Christian?
Yeah, so the takeaways are plan. So you need to understand your site content needs and plan accordingly. Test, like you need to test what you are configuring and don't assume that it will work like you think it will. It will because sometimes configuration is really tricky. So test all your cases, revisit it. Not only your configuration, and you not only need to grade your models for new releases, but you need to check if it changed something, and also revisit it, revisit the best practices there, and of course translate your content. You need to go to all of those markets out there.
And there's a resource slide after this, but bye. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, so the resources for this presentation. This presentation is already public online. It's been on the chat, posted before. There are two great talks that you may want to see by Jacob Perry and Chris van der Water in different Drupal camps, and those are available. They are related on nesting content, not specifically for multilingual, but even if you are not using multilingual sites, it can go wrong. So take those into account and feel free to connect with us if you have any questions. I'm not sure if we have time for that, but you can mail us, and I offer to be at the Linkotech booth if you want to ask something later today. I think that's it.
Great. Thank you so much. And please click the top for the evaluation of the session. Thanks for hanging on for everybody here. And so long, and thanks for all the fish. We'll see you in the, where are we going to see you? The networking, the booth. We'll see you in Barcelona. Yeah, hopefully.
Let's hope.
Hopefully. Yeah, let's hope. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care. Oh, yes. And I see people emphasizing testing. So yes, everybody test. Automated testing, human testing. Thanks, everybody.
Do you have the link to the slides at hand? I think I have it.
Oh, somebody just put it up. Leon, yeah, there it is. And I'll post them up. It's like, yeah, I'll talk to Christian, I'll talk to you and we can get a copy over to Lingotech. I'll put one on my site, but we can get it out quicker than getting it onto my sites and stuff. So cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. It is nice to virtually be with you. So yay. And then Eric, are you here? Okay, I think, do we just leave?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. I mean, if anybody wants to ask me more questions, but I think that we're done. It's going to probably cut us off in a second.
Yeah.
So.
I saw a question here that I wanted to cover.
Okay. There was one good question that I saw. I couldn't watch it because it was on the edge of my screen. There's asymmetric paragraphs has been a huge request. Do you use it in production? There's
Yeah.
yeah. So the answer, yes, use asymmetric paragraphs in production. Maybe we'll update the deck and just say, yes, we've been using this in production. Somebody wants to make sure we translate to cat. Okay.
I'm surprised my dog didn't decide to go into the conference too.
Oh yeah,
He was playing.
if you heard my
Yeah,
cat.
he was playing really close, so I was hoping for the worst. So that's why I actually mute myself at some point, and you were like, you didn't hear the white sound. You were like, oh, maybe my connection dropped or something, and it was myself that I mute myself before he started barking. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Here, let's see. I wonder if they can grab the chats, but
You cannot. So the chat I heard, people is copying it to documents. You can actually access this.
oh yeah, here.
You can access this URL till Friday, so you can, and the chat will be there. But on Friday, everything
Oh,
is
that's
gone. The
nice.
chat is gone.
Well, because everything goes away. Yeah. Okay. Well, this was great. Thank you so much. This was fun. So, um, very, very cool. Let's see. I'm trying to find where I can put a large amount of text. I put it all into a chat to you. So that wasn't on purpose. It was just the only thing that was open on my desk. Oh, okay. I didn't see what Brian was asking.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the question, and probably he left already. So he was
Let's see.
asking about multilingual
Would love to.
groups.
Oh, like organic groups based on language?
I'm not sure. That's what I'm not sure about the question. Like maybe he was talking. Yeah, I think it was actually groups, like the group model, like for
Yeah.
different region or markets, and then those can have multiple languages. Like for example, in Spain, we have 4 official languages and bilingual
Yeah.
groups.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that. That's actually really interesting. Okay, yeah, I'm not sure. There's a bunch of things around. I am going to research that. That sounds fun.
Yeah, actually, I've been thinking about that like since last week. Like, I'm not sure if there are any standardized solutions for regions. Like, if you want to have different regions and these regions point to a set of locales, like maybe you have Switzerland and then you can have French for Switzerland and Italian for Switzerland and German for Switzerland and Swiss. If there's any solution out there for building these kind of sites that are quite often a need, but most of the things I've seen are custom.
Yeah, in D7, we use domain access sometimes if you had that domain-based type of thing, but that was far more segregated between the site languages than a group would be. So yeah, I would think that it might be custom, like maybe some properties on a user's account or something that ties into some logic in a custom module that does stuff. based on
Yeah,
that
yeah,
person's like language or role.
yeah, but still you have the anonymous user. So if I don't know, if I go to a global brand site and I go to the Spanish market, still I need to have 4 different languages there. So this is like a really common use case, but I haven't seen anything like this is the go-to for this problem. You have this module.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, cool. Well, I'm gonna
Yeah,
bounce.
me
I
too.
think my parents are here to pick up my son.
Yay.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Pleasure. Bye bye.